So we're back with a new episode of AI Right. Unfortunately, we've not got the full team with us today, Andy. Just you, myself, and your good self. But
Yeah.
we're lucky to be joined by Jocelyn Burnham, founder of AI for Culture. Jocelyn, welcome to the show. Nice to have you on. How are you?
Thank you for having me. No, I am good down here in very sunny Brighton and trying to stay hydrated.
Very
What's the
good.
temperature in Brighton?
It's about 25 right now. We just had Pride, so there's sort of an atmosphere of celebration and kind of yeah,
Yeah.
a bewildered, slightly beweathered people walking the streets. We have a lot of fun.
The
Well,
the, the
surprise.
7 day hangover is truly in swing.
That seems to be the theme. Yeah.
It's good. It's good weather for a hangover 25. We've had Storm Floris. Was it? What was the name?
I think it was
Yeah, it was. Well, that was fun. My back garden has been completely trashed. I think
battered.
my wife has been trying to fix that today. So yeah, no, it's not too bad. There was worse ones before, but yeah, we've had the good stormy weather, haven't we, Chris?
Yeah, not a surprise. To be fair, I take it didn't reach you, Jocelyn.
No, I like a good storm though. I'm much happier in a good wind. You can go outside, you can scream. It feels visceral. When it's hot, it's just boring. Everyone expects you to have fun all the time. It's terrible.
To be fair, I'm the same. I
Yeah,
just watched the new Twisters movie, but I lived in Nebraska for a couple of years in
right.
Tornado Alley, and we had like plastic windows. But they would in regular storms in the summer, and to be fair, it was dead soothing. I used to love it for going to sleep at night. Um,
Me too. I used to live in the States as well, and I miss the storms so much. And I always thought if I wasn't doing like this, one thing I'd love to do is be like a storm chaser and like get
oh,
one of those vans and like I would really be into it. I think that'd be so much fun.
well, you're
I
braver
really,
than me.
we should do an episode just on this. I feel like there's
Yeah,
so much psychology to pick up for the both of you. But
yeah.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of modelling involved when they were doing trying to capture the data in their tornadoes. Andy, so it's maybe a future episode. But anyway, we're talking about AI and culture today, Jocelyn. So do you want to give us a bit of background about your business and obviously what you do and why this obviously is important to yourself?
Yeah, sure, sure. So my name's Jocelyn Burnham. So I'm all independent, and my whole thing is I work with the arts and culture sector and so the non-profit sectors too, and working around AI literacy, AI experimentation, and kind of how to be critical in like a self-directed way as well. So my whole thing is I'm very neutral with AI. I don't say it's inherently good or bad. I think each person is best placed to figure out what they want to learn, how it affects them, and kind of how they choose to apply it in their life. And within that, I work with organisations like the Tate, the Royal Academy of Arts, Shakespeare's Globe, RADA, even the Church of England has me sometimes, which leads to some fun conversations with priests. So yeah, it's I do a lot of random things around this, and a lot of it comes down to how can we kind of take a bit of power back? How can we sort of insert creativity into tech? And how can we use that in a way which kind of empowers us? So it's not a case of we're being told what to do and what's inevitable and what the world is going to be like, but we're actually getting ourselves into that conversation and hopefully kind of building up our agency at the same time. So that's kind of what I do. And I travel all around, make weird things, scare people a lot, and sort of see where it goes.
have you done much in
Fearmonger.
Scotland?
In Scotland, I did work with Edinburgh Fringe recently, so I was there for about a week, and we ran a couple of different workshops. We made some weird arcade games, kind of had some cool discussions. But I think that's the only Scottish project I've done. I'm doing a talk with the National Galleries, I think
No.
next month too.
Okay. We'll need to get you back up. Who before we get into the details of AI and culture, etc. Who is the coolest or kind of most out there, weirdest, wackiest group you've worked with? You've worked with so many different cultural bodies. There must be some absolute crackers.
Oh, that's a really good question. I did love the Fringe, actually, I have to say. They were really lovely. Love the team at the Open University as well.
Ooh.
And
Good
Art
shout.
Fund are doing cool things. Loads of people are doing really cool things. So I couldn't pick a favorite, but I love working with the Fringe. I love that whole team. So I'd definitely go back to that.
On the Open University, is that I take it now in cultural degrees and like artistic degrees as well. There's modules on using AI. Take it that's been incorporated into um s- the degrees. Would that be kind of standard now? Is that what you'd be brought in for if
Yeah,
you are
what were you
working in
doing with
universities?
Open Uni? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be standard. I know that they are obviously looking at it with the Open University. So I was brought in to do like a talk with their innovation team. So they do sort of external speakers. And then also I was brought in for a project where they were getting a bunch of artists to respond to technology and to sort of merge it with their practice, basically. And I was brought in to sort of be someone on hand who could AIify things. So it was a nice little. It was like a weekend in Margate where we were all making weird things. So yeah, it was a random project, but I love the Open University. I mean, I was raised as a homeschooler, so for me, the whole idea of like being in charge of your own learning and doing it in your own way is my whole bread and butter.
Mm.
Very good. Andy, we brought you in this podcast to AIify it. So that
AIFI. I like it. I'm
yeah.
going to use it.
Yeah.
I'm going to use it now.
Oh, very good though.
Well, yeah, I know. So Jocelyn, what do you when you work with these organizations? How does that kind of go? Like, what do you do? What's is there a standard format? Is it very bespoke? And just what does a typical kind of session or workshop with you look like?
Yeah, it depends a lot on like what the sector is, because it's not just culture sector I do. I also work with brands like Oakley, for example, but I'll go in and do some bits with them. So it does depend a little bit on kind of the context of what they want to do, what questions they're actually asking. A lot
Hmm.
of the time, if it's sort of more of an organization, people, if they don't know much about AI or they're just kind of stepping into it,
Yeah.
they think it's all about efficiency. So it's all about, how can we do things faster? How can we kind of be more efficient? And my first thing is always like, I don't. We can get to efficiency, but it's the most boring place to start. I would much rather start in a place of provocation or what makes work feel valuable or what makes us enjoy, working in this sector and how can we kind of use that in our AI language. So that's sometimes the first conversation with organizations, but then also with like artists or with groups who represent artists, it can be a lot more about actually what does creativity look like in the world of
Mm.
AI, and what does protecting our rights look like? What does learning and working as a professional creative or as an artist look like? And even if using AI isn't something you want to do, it is often about understanding how society might be affected by these developments so you can best represent your interests in your own way. So it's not about learn this tool and you'll use it in your art. It might be much more about these are some shifts we're seeing happen, perhaps
Mm.
in the market or perhaps in tech or perhaps in rights. And how can we sort of figure out a way to insert ourselves in that conversation that fits our values?
Wow, it's pretty big themes.
It
So
gets big
yeah,
and existential quite quickly.
it's
I'm sure as
pretty.
you both found, like you can start talking about one aspect of it, and very quickly
Yeah.
you'll talk about the fundamental purpose of humanity and all of this stuff, and it goes kind of crazy.
Wow. And the artists you sort of work with, how do they feel if you were to kind of map their sentiment on kind of, are they afraid? Are they excited? Are they a bit of both? Like where do they sit? And then how do you see them sort of change that as you work with them?
I would say, like, when starting out, it's maybe 90% negative. I think that's fair to say. And I think,
Mm.
that's understandable considering the context of how these
Yeah.
models have been trained on copyright and where it looks like copyright's going. And also, I think we're at a situation where a lot of the first adopters of this tech, especially those who've been using it to kind of create cultural assets, images or
Yeah.
stories or video or whatever, those have been a particular like a demographic of first adopters. And I think that for a lot of people working in the creative sector, they haven't seen themselves reflected in that work that's being created, and they haven't really seen a lot of that work as being particularly high quality. Kind of AI slop is the word that gets thrown around. So I think there's an impression a lot of the time that this stuff is very disposable, low value. It's not something they really want to engage with. And what's really interesting is kind of creating an opportunity where they can get their hands on something which they do want to use. Making like a computer game of Claude, for instance, about a
Mm.
moment in their personal history and doing something a bit self-expression like that. And then you kind of see that when they get their hands on a new tool and they can sort of access that in a way which they enjoy doing, sometimes it changes. I wouldn't necessarily say it makes them more positive, but it definitely makes them more curious about learning more. So yeah, generally I would say it's more negative, but there's a lot of curiosity there.
Mm. And the whole AI slop question is really interesting, right? So what do you think or maybe what do you think from the people you work with? Like, is the quality poorer, or is there something about the very nature of how it was generated that impacts its value as art? Do you know? Because there's these studies that have been done where I can't remember the exact question, but it was like, initially you'd say, oh, this piece of text or something was written by just you just say there's two pieces of text. Which do you prefer? And people would prefer the AI until they found out it was generated by an AI. So how much do you think it's and it's of course it's hard because it's all subjective. But what do you think about quality versus it's so contingent upon the actual nature of how it was expressed and stuff, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, I think some of the most interesting stuff is happening kind of in the middle, where you're getting stuff which isn't just a pure like
Mm,
AI output, but you're getting something where the human is getting really mixed up in that. Something I look at sometimes is sort of groups that are making whole graphic novels with AI image generators, but they're still writing the text themselves. Or you're getting people, using music generators who are writing the lyrics themselves, and it's still kind of infusing their own bit of human creativity into it. As far as like, does this stuff have inherent creative value? I mean, it's very subjective. It depends on who's
mm,
making it. I think we've got a lot of stuff from like first adopters in America where it is just of a particular vibe sometimes, which
mm,
just gets very boring very quickly. It
mm,
can seem very politically influenced as well, which puts people off. So it's case by case, but I think we are starting to get more interesting stuff coming out. And I think as it stops being just first adopters who are using and experimenting with this stuff, and it starts being more people who are kind of taking risks and doing sort
yeah.
of some aspects of creative practice with it, then you're getting some quite cool stuff emerging.
Fascinating. Chris, are you artistic? Have you
No,
have you done any
I
infused
mean,
human AI collaborations recently?
I don't. I've been using Canva a lot for AI generated pictures or social media posts. Don't get me wrong, I've not created loads of them. But no, how I work with our marketing, our social media consultant is we'll come up with some ideas and then we'll come up with a concept and we're using a lot of AI graphics now to bring that to life. And maybe if we're going to come up with we're building a new business and it's a product theme, so we're using an AI generated video to make a kind of small segment about what its capability. So it's definitely helpful from that perspective as like a small business owner. But no, unfortunately not too artistic myself.
Mm,
Sure, I mean, artistic, but I think creative. I think to put anything
mm.
out into the world, you have to be creative. And I think, creativity is such an interesting mix with these tools. I think you get much more out of it when you are sharing that.
100%. For somebody like myself who's obviously not technologically advanced too much, so I probably couldn't have went and built that without the use of Canva or something before. So it definitely has democratized the industry for somebody like me who can go in and maybe build something when I possibly couldn't have done in
Mm.
the past. But obviously, yeah, I was reading all about the copyright of AI models being trained on graphics and stuff like that. And obviously artistic are the people who originated those images not getting the um not exactly sure exactly where they fall under that, but obviously the government getting involved in certain acts that are being created on the back of that. And you were talking about it being political. Is that something that you see is going to be beneficial to the original artists that what's maybe been like plagiarized or whatever it might be?
I mean, at this point, we don't know where the law is really going. I mean, DCMS did a big consultation earlier this year to kind of have people feed into what the copyright situation is going to be with new AI models being developed. And it's looking likely, from my understanding, that it's going to be sort of an opt-out system where artists can opt out their creative work from being trained on new AI models.
Right.
But no one's quite sure what that's going to look like or how that's going to be like technically underpinned,
Yeah.
because if it slips into a data set somewhere or it's going to be very difficult to withdraw it. Um, so yeah, it's been a really interesting one with copyright. And obviously, when Midjourney first came out, you could have it imitate a living artist right off the bat, and it's still incredibly easy to do that. And tools like 4.0 from OpenAI can very easily sort of extrapolate image styles. You had the whole giblific I can't say about stuttering giblification
Yeah. Yeah.
scandal that
Yeah.
happened, and these models are very proud that they can do that. Even Sam Altman's avatar is still a giblified. I always stutter over that giblified version of his
No.
picture. So they want this to be something that people notice about their tools, and of course it causes upset. I mean, how could it not?
Yeah.
It's not asking permission, and it's taking a complete stylistic uh yeah version of something.
Yeah. And the kind of the related to that, I suppose. So like you say, there's maybe this opt out. We don't know how it'll be, as you say, technically underpinned or policed, etc. But is there conversations about how that leads to the appropriate compensation mechanisms and licensing, and just think about the economic impact. We talked a little bit there about the inherent artistic value, but then there's obviously the monetary value. Like artists try and make a living from what they do. Are they just being completely undercut, or is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Where's that at in your view?
That's a really good question. I've not seen anything substantial that talks about any kind of royalty system for artists in these models. I've not seen a whisper of that.
Mm,
I know that some models are trying to be more ethical. So you have Adobe is a real leader in that with their Firefly model that's only being trained
right.
on images they have copyright for.
Ah,
So that there are sort of models that are trying to show best practice here, and I think that's really respected. But no, I don't. In terms of artists being um, receiving any kind of payment or royalties for their work on this, I really haven't seen that at all.
do you think that'll mean the artists kind of won't want to put their stuff online, or is that just not helpful? Like, what do you know? Is there a strategy? You say you were kind of making art, or the people you speak to, do they have strategies for how to tackle this?
No, no, I don't think we're really that far ahead yet. I mean, I
Right.
think you're getting strategies where people are maybe locking, if they do a lot of writing or if they're on a
Yep.
publication. Um,
Yep.
I know people are putting up sort of more kind of blockers for AI training in that way, and I expect the
Right.
same is going to be true of other creative arts. But it's very difficult. I mean, if you have an Instagram page that a lot of artists do
Yep.
because it's a visual medium, it's the way that they get their work across, and you have people taking pictures of your work, you don't know where that
Yep.
image is going. It's incredibly hard to lock this down unless you go out of your way to, try and actually sabotage the model by putting certain types of watermarking
Mm,
into it. Yeah, there are attacks you can do, but they work model by model, and it's not really sustainable to do that. So it's
yeah.
no. The answer is I think it's been complete chaos, and I think it's caught a lot of people off guard because we didn't expect that
Mm,
every bit of human creative work would suddenly be thrown into these training
yeah.
sets.
Yeah, there's all these kind of memes and posts that went around saying, we thought we'd invent AI to do the mundane work of sort of the dishes and cleaning up so I could spend my time doing poetry and music. Instead, the AIs came to do poetry and music. So it's kind of like why have we done this? No, that makes sense. Yeah, the kind of attacks. I remember there was like Nightshades was one of them. I think where you could doctor some pixels in visual art and it would poison the model. And I think personally, these opinions are my own for any legal people listening. I kind of get where that comes from, right? Because you like artists pour their heart and soul in it. They're trying to make a living. We're all culturally richer because they do what they do. So I can understand them trying to take defensive measures. That makes complete sense to me. It's really I'm actually quite shocked that there's not more progress on a licensing or royalty model. To your point, I was hoping you would tell me yes, it's already be sorted, but it sounds it sounds like to your words it's quite chaos. That's
I, I I think it is, and I think part of this is because the creative sector has been caught off guard a little bit. There hasn't really been the time to build up literacy about how these models are trained, how these things work, and so being able to represent yourself in that conversation, is really at the embryonic stage a lot of the
right.
time. We're getting better, but I think that's why a lot of the work I do is about how you represent yourself in these conversations because right now these decisions are being made on purely economic factors or for business
Mhm.
factors, and we're not getting a lot of those voices in
Yeah.
that mix.
What
Yeah.
about when you go out? You said obviously you don't only work in the cultural sector, Jocelyn. So if you went out to like Oakley, for instance, you were working in a marketing campaign uh, within supporting one of their brands. Is there a big for any kind of campaign that they're looking for now? Are they looking to integrate AI, or are they open minded where their images come from or music or whatever they're taking to support their campaign? Are clients dictating because of cost now they want to integrate AI, or it can be from an artist directly?
Yeah, yeah. So a very typical example is maybe agencies where these are coming up, and yeah, they are. I think what I'm seeing now with agencies is they might still kind of hire a human at the end of their creative process, but they might do a lot of the ideating, a lot of the first sketches, kind of brainstorming with AI tools.
Okay.
So, they might well commission an artist to do their final piece, but, the 10 pieces before that, which they're talking about in their meetings and they're doing amendments on, might be with Midjourney or Ideogram or something like that. So you're kind of getting those. It's a bit stealth because you're still saying, well, we're still paying humans, but then some of the work that would have gone to humans is
Previous.
then not actually happening too. And again, I'm not here to judge. I understand everyone's doing a business, and I'm
Yeah.
not sort of saying anything's inherently right or wrong, but that's what I'm seeing. And then also in things like voiceovers too, I think this is being a bit underreported, but a lot of voiceover work seems now to be doable with 11 labs, and I'm hearing agencies say that they are increasingly
Yeah.
just using that unless there's any particular reason not to, rather than the other way around.
So,
Yeah.
for instance, yeah, I mean, if I wanted to create like some sort of video and I wanted Morgan Freeman to be my voiceover, can I use 11 Labs to do that? And there's no issues there,
They
is
might
that?
not be happy about it. And
But
he
they'll
and
go
he
back to the
he has the
copyright.
economic clout to come after you, Chris.
He has
Right?
got he does, but he's got the
He definitely
he's got the voice though. He has got the voice to promote
he's got a
anybody's
good voice.
product.
Yeah. I would actually rather you did an impression of Morgan Freeman and recorded that.
That
I'm
would be
not
more
sure.
legally safe, I would probably
That'd be
say.
far more legally safe and hilarious.
So
I,
people can do it for their fun, but for commercial purposes, there's a bit of a grey area there.
no, you can
Or
do it for commercial purposes on 11 Labs if you have the right license. I don't think Morgan Freeman's available, but you can definitely get.
oh, right, okay, so they license people's voices to be part of it.
Yeah, I had a good conversation with someone in the Isle of Wight. She's a voiceover actress, and she licensed her entire voice to 11 Labs, and she now gets royalties when that's used. So
That's
some
quite a
people are very
good
happily,
idea, to
yeah.
be fair.
Does she think that'll work out? Sorry, pick on her, but the artists doing that, they're almost they're almost being coerced into that mode, right? They kind of don't have an option. Do they think it will actually be net economically beneficial? Is it too early to tell?
I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, aren't we all funneled by economics into our particular, it's
This is
well,
true.
at what point is it personal choice? I think with her, it was very much a strategic thing where she
Yeah, yeah,
thought, well, if this is going to happen, I'd rather get in there early
yeah, yeah.
when I can, still kind of have a name for myself in this and get royalties. So she's been very happy with it,
Good.
but it does seem like a supply and demand thing. And once, I can only imagine once there's an abundance of voices that are licensed, it's going to get harder for individual voiceover artists to do. I mean,
Yeah,
that just seems logical to me, but
yeah,
I don't know.
that makes sense. Talking about the ad agencies, sorry, I just remembered, and I just checked it. There was a story I think in the Guardian a while back talking about, is it WPP? Is that one of the biggest, or maybe the
Agencies.
biggest ad agency in the world? And they're actually talking about this sort of C-suite were saying that they have to embrace AI because otherwise they'll be left behind. However, they're very aware it's going to cannibalize their own revenue. So they're sort of saying that, it's like a weird race to the bottom. Like their strategy is almost to undercut themselves because as you embrace AI tools that are inherently more democratized, to your point earlier, Chris, why would you pay a WPP the fortune that you pay them? Because it's becoming so much cheaper to generate the ad. So it's a super interesting one. Pivoting back to maybe the whole kind of creativity and the fundamental piece about art. I was going to ask you, Jocelyn, is there anything you've seen or anything in your workshops that's been created, or just anything where you've thought, oh, actually, this is a new art form, or this is pure creativity in a really exciting way? Like, just something where you saw where you just thought, oh no, actually, this is an example of this stuff mixing with human creativity. And you were mentioning, the examples like the human writing the lyrics and generating the music, etc. But is there anything you've seen you've thought, oh, that's actually blown me away? That's like really, really powerful.
All the time, actually.
Wow.
It's, I think whenever you get someone who's really throwing themselves into one of these
Mm,
processes, you generally do get some cool things. I think with coding is where I've been most sort of blown away when I've
mm,
seen maybe artists who have never done anything with coding, suddenly create this like sci-fi dystopian computer game that treats them as if they're like a spirit being downloaded to a central computer, and suddenly it has, and I'm just like, that's wild. You've made this entire thing, and
Yeah,
they've never even made like an HTML page before, and then
yeah,
suddenly they're having this whole interactive experience. And I'm like, there's nothing about that that isn't awesome to me. Like when I
mm,
personally look at that, and I'm like,
yeah,
you as a creative person now have access to this whole different way of affecting a human's,
yeah,
what they're experiencing with your work. So I personally, I'm one person. I personally get moments where I'm blown away all the time, or I find something very funny, or I just
yeah.
sort of love the weird mixture of vulnerability with these models. And I use
Mm,
myself as an example, all the time, and that to see how vulnerable you can get and what happens when you throw like your vulnerable
mm.
human self at these tools.
Amazing. So there is a potential story where it's like things just change, but it's just new types of art and creativity to give to your use of word earlier. It's they emerge. Because you talk about this in coding, people are saying like Chip Hoyen. I always pronounce her name wrong, but she's a very prominent AI engineer. She wrote a very famous AI engineering book, etc. But she has this great analogy where she says everyone's worried about coding being automated, but it's sort of analogous to the act of writing changing what it means. So it used to be that writing was a very mechanical act that only monks, etc., could do, scribes and so on. And it was all calligraphy and it was extremely sort of taxing and required lots of concentration. But with technology, the act of writing became more how do you organize ideas using words, and you use that through different media. So it's kind of, it sounds like there's potentially a similar transformation going
Yeah.
on in
Yeah,
parts of culture. Yeah.
I'd really agree with that. I mean, a lot of this is about sort of the drawbridges being lowered, sort of the traditional barriers that have stopped people from working with certain types of, art forms or coding or whatever.
Mm.
Suddenly, it's much easier to do that. Suddenly, you can make a graphic novel of a type if you want to. Suddenly, you can make a song
Yeah.
kind of if you want to. And that ruffles a lot of feathers because, we've structured society in such a way where we've kind of given legitimacy to certain ways that certain types of work is made. And I think it's fair to reflect on the idea that this kind of challenges a lot of our sense of how society works. That you get trained to do something, suddenly
Yeah.
you've had a degree in fine art, now you're recognized as someone who should be able to do these kind of things. And when you get these kind of new
Yeah.
tech disruption things, yeah, it's gonna create a lot of anxiety with that, and I think that will obviously make people be influenced depending on where they sit in that shakeup.
Yeah, but it's challenging as well, I suppose. Just even for people from that, appreciating creativity angle again. So Doug Hofstadter, I think, said this. So he's a kind of the writer of Godot Back, kind of famous computing scientist. But he said, if AI is able to generate like the equivalent of I think he said like a Beethoven symphony or Mahler symphony or something. He says, I'll quit or something. And he says now that's happening. And he's like, I'm a bit shocked because I thought that was such a fundamentally human thing. I can't remember it. Someone will remember the quote. One of the two
You
viewers
can
will
pull
write
it
in.
up.
But but like it's that I suppose it's that thing as well where it challenges your view of what creativity used to mean, sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it does. And like, I've listened to AI music and I've thought some of this is okay and I can get on with it. But for me, this is the thing, I can only speak about me personally because I don't try and predict the future on this stuff. But like, I think humans care about human stories most of all. And I don't think that's going to change. There was someone I was speaking to who works in A&R for a label, for like a music label. They were
Mm.
talking to me about a band that they wanted to sign because they thought the music was great. But her words were, they're great, but there's no story there. They're just nice boys. There's nothing there that we can really have as a romantic story. And I thought that's so interesting that
Yeah.
even now with humans, to make something feel important, you have to have some human connection, some human story to it. And I'm sure that there's going to be some relevance of that when it comes to AI generations. We're going to want to learn about other humans, and no matter how good a piece of creative work might look,
Yeah.
to me, it feels like its shelf life will be limited if we don't care about the story underneath it.
I think I'm skeptical that there's going to be an AI Glastonbury, that we're going to have all these
Well,
punters going to some sort of festival.
Glastonbury, there's some way of saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Put the
I
AI in the
don't.
middle.
I think, yeah, those type of musicians are going to be safe for a while.
But that's a good point, Chris. Would you consume AI? music and stuff? Have you tried that? What do you think?
I
Whenever
haven't.
I've listened to it, I'm always like, I hate this.
I was reading about the collab between Drake and The Weeknd or something like that they put a song
Right.
together that went viral. But no, I've not really heard any, to be honest with you. But I don't think so. No, I think I would be a
Mm.
purist when it comes
My
to music.
brother, yeah, my brother who was um he was a kind of runner and location scout and trying to get in the media, the film. So he worked in the Avengers and all this stuff. But he plays with all these things and he keeps sending me these AI generated music uh videos and but mostly songs just about totally random things. He thinks it's hilarious. And I'm just like, I just don't get this. I just don't get it. But then I remember introducing him to ChatGPT. And Jocelyn, you might like this, but the way I introduced him was because he's a creative type. I says, let's just ask it to write us a story, and we just had this amazingly hilarious time writing a real set of parodies about the Avengers, and like we made like Captain America like an ultra feminist, and we made like or the Hulk maybe it was something we did all this stuff, and the Hulk was a pirate and all this crap, but it was like it was very expressive and it was very creative and it was a weird experience, but yeah, I appreciated that sort of generating these synthetic stories with a bit of nudging, but for some reason music doesn't land with me, so it's
I
weird.
love I love that, and also that's my whole thing. Is like be playful with this stuff because you learn
Mm,
about it much faster than when you're just trying to be efficient.
yeah,
But also on the creative side, I mean, people often think like the dichotomy is, would it create something that you would marvel at in a museum and would be a really important part of human culture? Whereas the reality is, a lot of the art and culture we consume in a day is stuff which maybe doesn't go in like your primary radar. Like it's the
yeah,
background music to an advert,
yeah,
it's some artwork in a hotel. It's stuff which is part of the world you live in, but not necessarily something you primarily focus on. And actually, a lot of the time, that level of art is the one that might be most kind of vulnerable to AI because it's stuff which we don't need in a way to have a real strong human story. And a lot of that creative work is really the bread and butter of
yeah,
a professional. So it's interesting to think about the different levels here of how this stuff could
yeah.
kind of infiltrate.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so like,
Well,
yeah, exactly. If you're a session musician, or something, like, yeah, where does that leave you eventually? Yeah, it's good, good
Yeah,
point.
or if you
and
make a jingle for the radio,
Yeah,
which is a
yeah,
lot of people's jobs.
yeah.
And yeah.
and that's purely down to what accessibility and cost. You can do it much cheaper and you can get access to it much quicker, essentially.
Yeah,
So
well, yeah, I mean, if you use Udio for it, you make a 30-second jingle, make it in many different genres, amend it, it's going to be tempting for people to do that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
100%. What about the technical side of it, Andy? So these are obviously the
Mm.
way if you're prompting and it generates an image or it generates a voiceover, whatever it might be, it's all LLMs, isn't it? It's all just a different
Well,
variation of.
it'll be multimodal models. So, the modality refers to the input and output sort of. Don't want to say mode again. The nature of the input and the output. So if it's you get text to text models, that was the kind of bread and butter. But most models now, especially the latest frontier models, are multimodal. So you can give it text and it gives you back an image. You can give it an image and it gives you back text. You can give it text and it gives you audio, etc.
Right, okay.
Not all of them cover all modalities out the box. So some are mostly text and image are the most interchangeable. It's all just about what they're trained on because they are fundamentally, and this is the important thing that people always forget, is like they're still machine learning models. They're not little kind of conscious things, right? And it's easy to forget that, but they are machine learning models trained on vast amounts of data, extracting patterns from that data, from the text, from the audio, from the video. So to your point, Jocelyn, that's why they imitate very well existing artists. And yes, people always say, yeah, but they're creative when you turn up the temperature and, things become more stochastic in terms of the sampling. But fundamentally, um, it's still pastiche. It's still taking cuts of different things and slicing it in a very complex way, in a way that's very hard for us to sort of very, very directly map. But it is fundamentally that. So yeah, it's kind of the interesting thing I think for me has been that the technology's been around for a few years, as we've said in the podcast before. Like the Transformer paper came out a few years ago, but the key breakthrough has just been vast amounts of data and scale, and it's just amazing how that is then spread so quickly throughout all of culture. I think that it's like we talk about, like, it's so democratized now. It was the first time everyone I could point to something on everyone's phone and say, that's what I work on. Well, before I used to use the example of like an Alexa, even though I never did audio stuff. But now they can sort of very directly see that. But it's absolutely everywhere now. And you have all this kind of fear, and then you had the writer's strike in America. I remember that. That was a huge thing as well, wasn't it? All the screenwriters. So, but yeah, fundamentally, Chris, the tech's the same. The thing has just been the scale, and as Jocelyn mentioned, the access to the data was the key thing. Just scraping the internet for absolutely everything.
That's where I get very curious about, because it is replicating patterns that it gets from large data sets, but also when we get to the point where it can extrapolate a pattern from a specific example in a different domain, and how it
Mm,
does that creatively. So, looking at how one person wrote
yeah.
about how they built the Brooklyn Bridge or something, and then using that structure as a way to think, well, if you applied that creative process to writing a song, what would that look like? Kind of real cross domain
Mm,
creativity. That's something which I think is going to be really interesting to see, definitely in like the medical fields with research and how,
yeah.
weird insights from one paper that was, in 1991 that no one's read suddenly are really relevant for this whole different domain, but how that applies to arts and culture as well.
Oh, I love it. But then even there's fun things about how they trip up. Um, they're sort of creative in a different way. Like they don't get physics. They just don't. They just can't because they've not been physical. They've not experienced physical data the same way we have. Robots and stuff that'll come along. But it's just there's funny things about how they fail, and I've kind of played around with them before and sort of just prod these thought experiments a bit and just try and trip it up. And you can get quite creative in how you trip it up and get it to like trip up over basic physics problems that we know. You throw up a ball that way, catch. But if I'm standing on the wall and I throw up a ball, where does it go and stuff? It just gets confused.
Yeah.
There's weird
This
things like that.
I get this all the time. Like they're surprisingly good at something, surprisingly weak at others. It's the whole like a jagged edge idea, isn't
Yeah,
it?
the jagged frontier. Yeah.
Jeopardy. And like even one of the things that I still think they're very weak at is being able to not go like if you say, okay, that was a bit too formal, could you make that letter slightly less formal?
Mm.
Suddenly it'll rear into hyper, hey, what's going on, lol? How are you doing? And it's like it's really bad at actually being able to accommodate slight adjustments without rearing off somewhere. So there are certain things where like they're incredibly impressive, but there are loads of areas where they are laughably bad at the same time, which is why I enjoy being neutral because I like to point out that these things, are not the
Perfect.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely.
Oh, well, that was a really enjoyable conversation. Jocelyn, we really enjoyed having you on. Andy, was there anything else you wanted to ask Jocelyn before we finished up?
Yeah, maybe the last one to wrap up. What does a good future look like with AI? That's a big question. But what kind of would you want to happen over the next few years?
That's a really good question, and I'm trying to not be too dark about it because I want to end on a hopeful note.
I said good. I said good.
Good. Well, because my version of good is just staying alive. No, no, that sounds darker than I mean.
Me too.
I mean, like, I don't want nation states to kind of just go crazy with this stuff and see it as the next thing to militarize, and that's what
Mm,
I want to really avoid. What I personally would love is to see open source still keep up as much as it has been with some of the frontier models, really keep on being competitive to that. So hopefully there's not like one form of, you know, alignment or one form of, you know, what a moral AI is. I would love to see a real rich assortment of different open source models that people can pick and choose and mix together and kind of align to their own sectors and allow them to use that, therefore, to represent themselves better. I think that would be a cool future, and I think that's one that's realistic too.
love it.
Very good. Well, on
Oh,
that
thank you so
positive
much for
note,
having me. Thank you.
no,
I really
it was our pleasure. Thanks again. See you soon.
thank you very much.
Cheers.
Have a lovely rest of your year.